to say a great big welcome to everybody that's at our meeting today, wherever you are. It's so great that we can do this nationally, isn't it? And it really shows the growth and the interest that the fellowship has around the country. And I must say that I think there's a great thing that we're a great movement that we're part of. I would just like to welcome anyone who's here for the first time. And as Peter said, you're probably wondering what you're doing here and what this is all about. So just a few words about that. We are a fellowship, which means that we're a group of people who like each other, who are friendly with each other, who are developing our relationships with each other. And that's the most fundamental part of this organization. We are a non-denominational group of people. We have people who go to all sorts of churches. We don't usually talk a lot about that, but all I'm saying there is that we are a very diverse group of people, and some people among our numbers have a very strong faith in God and are pursuing that, and others are just discovering and finding things out for the first time. So that's a unifying point of discussion, and we have those discussions and we listen to speakers who've had life experiences talking about how their faith affected the way they run their life, the way they relate to their families, their work, and so on. So I think you'll find that through our wonderful speakers and the many recordings we have of past speakers, you'll pretty soon get an idea of what we're about. And we hope that you'll continue to join us. Now, I'd like to just quickly introduce Frank. When I read Frank's bio, I must say I had this following irreverent thought. How nice it is to have someone who makes something on this program. We have pundits, we have talkers, we have politicians, we have people of all different stripes, but Frank, I think you're one of the very few people who know how to make stuff. So that's very nice, and we hope you'll tell us a bit more about that. Frank's company has been around for a long time, and it's in the air conditioning heating business. And more than that, I'm going to leave him to tell you about. So with that, Frank, welcome. We look forward to what you've got to tell us, and to everyone else, I hope that you'll enjoy this session.
Well, thank you, Peter. And firstly, let me say, without question, that is the best introduction I've had today. The second thing I'd like to say is I make things every day, and at the top of the list, and by far the greatest number of them, are mistakes. But somebody said the man who didn't make a mistake didn't make anything. And in fact, innovation, which I have a love affair with and have had for the last 50 years, is all about making mistakes. But I do remember what was said to Edison when he actually got the light globe up and running. And somebody said to him, 10,000 failures. However did that affect you? He said, it didn't affect me because I didn't have any failures at all. Every one of those instances was a step in the pathway to the success we now have, which is a great way to look at things.
Wonderful. Wow. I think we're off to a flying start. Thank you, Frank. Well, as Oliver said in the introduction, your company's been around a while. In fact, I think you're celebrating 50 years. That's correct, isn't it?
That's right, yes. We started the company in February 50 years ago, whatever that is. The maths escapes me just for the moment. It's not difficult, though.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Do you sometimes pinch yourself that it's been going so long?
I never thought I'd do that. What I thought I'd do, actually, to start with, was if I got myself enough money to be able to invest it and live off the interest, that was what I wanted to do. By nature, I know that I am a lazy person. I started off life as a school teacher, and I would look forward all year to the Christmas holidays. And when they came, I would do nothing. And after a few weeks, I would be quite morose. and my mother would stir me up. She was a wonderful woman, and get out and do something. If you can't think of anything else, we'll go weed the garden. So that's in my nature. But the wonderful thing is that you can overcome those things.
So maybe just in a few sentences for those who aren't aware, just give us a sense for what do you do? What does Seeley Air Conditioning do? And a sense of the scale of your operation.
Well, Seeley International makes evaporative coolers and gas heaters. We started out. I started out and I made 1,000 in the first year. And we thought, Kathy, my wife and I, and she was very much part of this whole success, I've got to tell you, we thought we were Father Christmas on a stick. But in year 10, we made and sold 150,000. And that sort of growth was quite meteoric, especially as when we started off, we really didn't do anything but assemble the parts that other people made for us. But by 10 years, we were making our own electric motors. We were doing our own injection molding. We were making our own filter pads. Pretty much everything that we could make was made in-house.
So you're bucking the trend with Australian manufacturing there.
Oh, I'm an absolute believer in it. And it's coming back. And it's wonderful to see it coming back, and actually to have a part in helping it come back. We were approached a couple of years ago by somebody who said, with the equipment you've got, you can make these things for us, we believe, that we're getting from China. We looked at it and said, yes, we can. We did a dance around the price and things like that for about 12 months. And also we were experimenting during that time. And then they placed their order. And we brought back $1 million worth of business that had been with China from the time that this company had started its existence some years ago. And that's now back in Australia. The Chinese then, when they realised they'd lost their market, they knew, of course, all the customers. They make it their business to do such things. And they went to them and they said, have we got a deal for you? We're not only going to give you all of the distributor's margin, but we're going to give you a lower price again. And the interesting thing was that to a man, those customers said, no, thanks. We would rather buy the Australian product. There's never been a better time for people to make things right here in our island nation.
So again, in terms of the scale, what's the size of your sort of operations, your geographical presence, employees at the moment?
Well, we've got two factories, one at Lonsdale here, which is a suburb of Adelaide, and one in Albury. The one in Albury really makes the gas heaters and some of our very large coolers. We bought that company in 1996. It was Braemar. And initially, I intended to bring it back to Adelaide and hook it onto what we were doing here so that we had production all the year round. But I saw the looks on so many of the faces of the people there, the look of sometimes fleeting fear, sometimes constant fear. Is he going to close it down and take it back? And they were so dedicated that I said, no, we will leave it here. And it's been the right thing to do.
Wonderful. And I understand you have a number of employees who have been with you 10, 20, 30, even 40 plus years. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. Murray Morton started in our second or third year. I think it was our third year as my assistant general manager. I'd known him from years before, and he was a wonderful help to me. And in fact, he was the guy who said to me at one point in time, when we had a new all plastic cooler, he said, I'd like to take this overseas. And I said, well, I can understand, Murray, that you might like an overseas junket, but I don't see any point in that. And he got on to Austrade and various other people and found out that they would actually, in those days, pay his fare and his accommodation while he was away. And I said, okay, you get one shot at this. You go for a month. And if you're not successful and you don't get any business, then don't talk to me about this again. When he got home, I said, where's your sample, the portable sample that he'd taken with him? He said, oh, I left it at the Iraqi trading company. I said, but they told you they weren't interested. He said, yeah, that's right, but it was difficult to get it out of Iraq. I said, well, Murray, if you ever go overseas again and take a sample with you, if they're interested, you can leave it. If they're not interested, please bring it home. But I was dead burn wrong, because what happened with that sample was that they had a belter of a summer and their building was hot, and somebody said, try this cooler. And they put it on, and the first we knew was when we got a telex which said, please give us a quote on 20,000 of these products. And we found out that we had to go way up there so that we could settle at about 50% of where we started. And when we got to that stage, we said, no, there's no more room. They said, you must be here in 7 days to meet our director. And somehow we got there. We had to take a taxi from Kuwait to Baghdad, because although we had bookings, when we went up to get our tickets and we were first in line, Arabs, they wouldn't take them, and Arabs came up behind us and every one of them pushed through, and eventually the guy said, oh, sorry, the plane's full. So with another fellow, a more local guy, a Middle Easterner, he said, look, I'm going to take a taxi, would you like to share it with me? So we did that, and we got there, we walked in, and we were there on the 7th day. And there was a girl at the desk filing her nails. She didn't stop filing her nails. She just looked up and she said, can you come back on Thursday next week? I said, what? I said, you listen to me. The director asked that we be here on this day, and we're here. It's taken us tremendous trouble to get here. So please, we need to see somebody today. We won't be here on Thursday of next week. She said, one moment. She went away. She came back a while later and she said, come with me. So I winked at Murray as if to say, that's how you do it, fella. And we walked down a long passage into a dark room, and there was an old dining room table with the old dining room chairs with springs in them. And we sat, she said, sit here. Well, we sat there for half an hour, then we sat there an hour, 2.5 hours. We heard somebody coming. But that was only another couple to sit at the table. They were from Japan. And unfortunately, they got seen before we did. And when we got in, the director said, well, you've got to cut the price in half. I closed my book and I stood up and grabbed my satchel and I said, I'm sorry, you have completely wasted our time in coming here. We cannot do anything about the price. We made that clear. If you're not prepared to accept that price, we're going. He said, sit down, sit down. We eventually got our price. Halfway through the contract, we got another telex, which said, can you make us another 20,000? Murray wanted to go straight back and say, yes, we can. I said, no, Murray. It's got to appear to be difficult. So I said, we're going to take 2 or 3 days. And we went back and we said, yeah, well, we can do another 20,000. And they said, well, what's the discount on the price? We said, you've already got the maximum discount available. And we got another 20,000. The following year, we got 100,000, which is the biggest order in numbers we've ever had. More recently, we got an order for 50,000 rooftop coolers for the Hajj to cool the tents there. And we were up against 200 global competitors. Ours was the most expensive, but we won that order.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, there's some great insight, I think, through that story into your character, Frank, that we've all now received. Let's go back a little bit. What do you think, given what you said earlier, your character, you said you're by nature perhaps a bit lazy, but what gave you the inspiration, and who were perhaps some of your role models in the early days that led you to the business?
Well, I was the youngest of 8 children, and I had 2 brothers, and they were at the top end of the family. The second brother, Cedric, became my role model after my father died, just a little while before I turned 10. He was a wonderful man, a beautiful man. And although he had 8 children and he had a job that kept him very busy, he always had time. I never felt ever that Father didn't have enough, as much time as I needed him to be with me. It was just remarkable. So when he went, it took me years to get over that. I can remember probably about age 15, still at times crying myself to sleep over the loss of my father. But my brother filled in, my second brother. My eldest brother was married, and then he moved to Melbourne and didn't see much of him. But my other brother was a kindred spirit. He had a great sense of humour, and we bounced off each other, fed off each other, whatever you like to say. We really had a tremendous amount of fun together. He pulled some atrocious tricks on me, and I was able to get some back on him from time to time. But I learned most of what I know about business from him. And I learned the importance of overcoming, because he was badly smashed up in a motor accident and was 12 months convalescing. And he came back with very little eyesight, no sense of smell or taste. He had bad head injuries. And he came back from that and succeeded again. And I suppose one of the things I've learned from life is that necessity is the mother of invention. And I would have never got into manufacturing coolers if the arrangement that he and I had with somebody who wanted to make coolers had continued. But what happened, we had an arrangement for 5 years with a right of renewal for a further 5 years. My brother, alas, went into hospital at 35 for a gallbladder operation, which they messed up. He got peritonitis and he passed away, leaving a wife and 6 children. One of them, she only knew she was pregnant with 2 weeks after he died. And our 4th was born 2 days after he died. So at 27, my mentor was gone. My second best friend was gone, and I had the responsibility for this business, and I was frightened. I don't mind telling you, I was frightened. But the fact is, over the next 3.5 years, I built it from where it started at 1,000 units a year to 20,000. And we had a contract which had the right of renewal for a further 5 years. And I didn't know anything about legal things, and I didn't know right of renewal meant all the terms had to be the same. And the owner came to me and he said, we got to sign a new contract. I said, yes. And he said, now we've got to change some of the terms. And I said, what in particular? He said, well, the commission. And I knew he was making a lot of money. So I said to him, why? He said, because I'm paying you too much money. And I said, well, what have you got in mind? And he said, well, we'll cut the commission in half. I said, well, if you do that, I'm working for nothing. He said, I don't expect you to work for nothing. Why would you be working for nothing? I said, because half of what you paid me last year was spent on airfares, accommodation, entertainment, advertising, marketing. So he said, no, I'm not unreasonable. I don't expect you to do that. I said, well, what do you expect me to do? He said, go out and double the sales. And I thought to myself, well, not only are you unreasonable, you're stupid as well. So I went home to Kathy. We just paid off our house. And I told her what had happened. And she said, what are you going to do? And I said, I think we'll make our own coolers. She said, okay. I said, now that means we're going to have to remortgage the house. She said, okay. I said, it actually means we're going to have to mortgage the house more heavily than it's ever been mortgaged. She said, okay. Thought, I'm not getting through to you girls. I said, now, if everything goes as we hope, it'll be fine. If it doesn't, we could lose everything. She never hesitated. She looked me in the eye and said, I don't care if I've got to live in a tin shed as long as I can live with you. Now, gentlemen, I have to tell you, that has been the greatest thing, the second greatest thing in my whole journey, because I have never had to make a decision based on how the heck am I going to handle this at home if it goes wrong. And I saw many of my peers who were equally as good at business as I was, who didn't take the extra risk because of what might happen at home. And I give thanks to Kathy for that. So she's really the one who should be here, except it's a men's fellowship, so we all understand she can't be on screen.
Yeah, but she did set up the iPad for you this morning, so she's a woman of many talents.
Oh, and she's in the background.
Yeah, well, some amazing stories there of, what you shared about losing your dad early and the influence of Cedric and the bravery of your wife, and also your perseverance and your willingness to and not take, rubbish from that guy that you were working with. So, Frank, I guess you've experienced a lot over these 50 years, and if you look back and reflect on it, what do you put it down to? Do you said necessity is the mother of invention? Do you see that your faith has played a part, that God's hand has played a part? How would you look at the 50 years?
Oh, look, no question about it. The hand of God has been in and over this business from day one. I mean, I didn't know anything about manufacturing. I was a failed school teacher, if you like. I failed because I didn't want to do it. It wasn't for me. But I had selling experience, but I had no practical experience. But I found out I was an innovator because in the early days, when I promised product to some of the big organisations, Malvern Star Stores was part of the Phillips Group, and they had committed to come with us. And I got that business, which was right across the nation. And I promised Noel Ware that we would deliver his product in the first week in September. And I rang in August and asked the factory, and they said, yes, it'll be delivered. It'll be there in all the stores in the first week in September. I got a call from Noel during that week, towards the end of that week, and he said, Frank, where are my coolers? I said, no, they're in your stores. He said, they're not, Frank. We haven't got a single cooler. The factory had not bothered to tell me that they had a problem. So I rang them and they said, we've got a problem. I said, well, what's the problem? Oh, well, you wouldn't understand. I said, I have to understand because I've got to be able to tell my customers what's going to happen. So I'm coming around and you're going to show me what the problem is. And what it was that in this portable cooler, they had water intermittently spurting out the back frame and going, of course, onto the carpet, which was quite unacceptable. They took the back panel off and showed me where it was happening. And I said, well, why don't you put some sponge rubber around that? Oh, and engineers there said, oh, look, you wouldn't know how to fix this. You leave it to us, we'll get it fixed. Had a call from a different engineer the following morning, said, oh, I'm ringing to tell you we've got it fixed. I said, that's terrific. How did you fix it? Oh, he said, we got this strip of thin sponge rubber and put that around it to fix it. I said, oh, terrific. From then on, every time they had a problem, they called me in. So I knew I was an innovator. Over the next 2.5 years, I solved a lot of problems. And I guess it's left-handed brain. I don't know what it is, but I'm a lateral thinker, and there's always another solution out there that's better than the one you've got. So we're always looking for it. And I don't know where you started or where I've got to, but Peter, if you want anything more on that, ask me again.
No, that's all good. Well, in a similar vein, tell us about the story about what drove you to developing your own motors.
Well, in 1980, we were buying a lot of motors, and we were buying from one company, Betts Motor Company, was owned by a company called James N. Kirby. And we had bought 76,000 motors that year. And we were selling a lot of them overseas. And Kevin Kirby decided he'd come and see me. Now, Kevin was a big guy, about 6'6" and quite large with it. My office had been the small bed, the front bedroom in a small prefab house. And he brought his entourage, he brought his group managing director, Alan Massey, and the manager of his motor division, Jim Lum. And by the time Big Kevin and those other two were in my office with me, there wasn't a whole lot of room. Anyway, we'd had a lot of problems. So Kevin said to me, "Now, Frank, my boy," and I didn't mind that. He was a doyen of industry in Australia and probably 15 years my senior. And he said, "Now, Frank, my boy, you've been having a lot of problems." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Tell me about them." And I told him each one of them, and he wrote them down on his pad. And it was about a list of about 7 or 8. And he said, "Anything else?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What?" He said, I said, "Your price is going up out of kilter with inflation and you're going to have to do something about it." He didn't write that down. He then said, "Now, in relation to point 1, we will do this, this, and this." And it was generous. And he went through all of them, the ones he'd written down. And he said, "So I think that's it, isn't it?" I said, "No." He said, "What else is there?" I said, "I told you that we're selling to the world now, and your prices are going up out of kilter with inflation, and you've got to do something about it." He said, "I didn't write that down, Frank, my boy, and I'm not going to do anything about it." And I said, "Why not, Kevin?" He said, "Because, Frank, my boy, there's a thing called a monopoly, and we're it." Kevin Kirby had gone around and bought up all the electric motor companies in Australia. There was a 35% duty on motors coming into Australia, and he was gradually raising the prices to that extra 35%. And I said, "Well, Kevin, if you don't do something about it, there are other things we can do." He said, "Frank, my boy, if you're thinking of importing, don't waste your time, because we'll make sure our price is always within plus or minus 50 cents of what you can bring it here for." And I said, "Well, there's another alternative." He said, "What?" I said, "We can make our own motors." I can see him now looking around this room where the laths in the plaster ceiling was poking through, and this tiny little room, which was evidently not an office, although it had a desk in it and a few chairs, and he started to laugh. Now, Kevin, as I said, was a big man, so we all moved up and down with him because it was also a very springy floor. And he said, "Frank, my boy, you don't know what you're talking about." He said, "It'll cost you $1 million to get into making electric motors." And I said, "Kevin, if you don't do something about your price on motors, within 12 months, we will be making our own." He said, "I won't write that down either, Frank, my boy, because it'll never happen." And, we left quite jovially. And in fact, I think we went round and had some lunch at the local, which I made sure that he paid for. And 11 months later, Jim Lunn rang me. And he said, talked about the grapevine in this industry. I said, "Yes, it's alive and well." He said, there's a rumour going around at the moment, and we don't think it's true, but we thought we'd ask you." I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Well, the rumour's going around that you're going to make your own electric motors." And I said, "Well, that one's true." And he bristled up. He said, "After all we've done together, after all our history, after all we've done for you," I thought I'd done more for them than they'd done for me. But anyway, "after all we've done for you, I thought you would have at least told us first." I said, "I did." He said, "No, you didn't." I said, "I did." He said, "No, you didn't." I said, "Jim, you were in my office with Alan Massey and Kevin Kirby when I said, if you don't do something about your price of electric motors, within 12 months, we would be making them ourselves." He said, dead silence. And he said, "Oh, but we didn't think you were serious." And I said, "Well, that's your problem, not mine." The wonderful thing about that story, the God thing about that story, is that was when we got the order. The following year to the one I told you about, when they doubled the order, the Iraqis ordered 100,000 portable coolers. One order delivered over a period of time. We had to put in a second production line, and that was great too, because the top one vied with the bottom one to get and see who could get the most out the day. Production went up at a great angle. But look, and the interesting thing was, we did make our own motors. Simpson Pope had stopped making motors, and the guy who'd been giving me so much trouble in negotiating prices across the desk came and said, if you want to make electric motors, I'm your man. I said, I want to make electric motors, and thanks, let's get on and do it. And the wonderful thing about it is that the extra money that we made on that order, we saved $10 per motor by making our own money, our own motors. And that $10 times 100,000 coolers was $1 million. And Kevin Kirby was right. It cost $1 million to make that electric motor plant, but we paid for it in the additional money we got on those motors.
Great story. Great story. So it strikes me, Frank, that you are quite comfortable with taking risks. Would you say that's true?
Well, it is true because I married Kathy.
So what do you put that down to? And is it connected, do you think, to your trust in God?
Oh, it absolutely is. And as I look back at all of the things that have happened, I mean, there's some terrible things that have happened. In our third year, we had 2 fires in 5 weeks. The first burnt the factory to the ground. The second one, the fire brigade got inside early and found 5 fires burning. The police never found anybody. They thought it was me for a while, and I was suspect number 1, and I wasn't allowed to leave Adelaide or the state without advising them. I didn't want to anyway. I had so much to do there to get back into production. But they came up with the right answer, as I knew they would, that we had everything to lose and nothing to gain by fires because we were making good money on the coolers, and we had a book full of orders. I said to them, look, I would have been just as innocent if this had happened in a bad year when I had a store full of unsold coolers. I'd have been just as innocent, but I would have felt guilty because it would have looked as if that I had lit the fire deliberately. But that's only one thing. We've had terrible problems with bankers. Now, bankers, let me say, and I know, Peter, that you are one, but not of the sort that I'm talking, at least not these days, not for a long time. Bankers are the sort of people that give you an umbrella when the sun's shining, and they take it away when it starts to rain. And we experienced that with Westpac. My father said to me before he died, and that was when I was only 9, he said, son, when you grow up, he said, select a bank and stay with that bank for the rest of your life, and they will always look after you. And that was perfectly true back in his days, but that hasn't been true for some considerable time. So we had a problem with them. We actually, that was when interest rates were at an all-time high. We were paying 18% interest, and the Gestapo guy that they sent in to look after us, all the relationship guys they duck for cover. They're gone. You can't get any of them. And this Gestapo guy came in and he said, well, we're considering you're in default, so you're going to pay 7% penalty. We were paying 25% interest. And then he had the gall to say to me, we don't think you're going to get out of this. And I said, not much wonder when you're charging me 25%. But we got out of it within a year. Now, that was, yes, I worked hard. I worked 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. But that wasn't the point. That work, had it not been that God opened up the way for it to happen, that work would have been in vain. The Bible speaks of, God speaks of people earning wages for a bag with holes. And that's what happens. They can work hard and get nowhere. But God was in that, and he's been in so many things that have happened. He was actually in this sense in the death of my father, because my mother had never worked while married, but she said, well, there's only one thing, I've got to go back to school teaching. And there was never a word of self-pity, or she just did what she had to do, and life went on. We entertained people around our dining table on Sundays. And I remember going to her once and saying, Mum, can I have 1 and 6 to buy a yo-yo at school? And she said, Frank, if I had 1 and 6, I'd give it to you, but I don't have it. And she said, if you want a yo-yo, you're going to have to go around and knock on the door of neighbours and do weeding or wash windows. Now, I realise it's a different day. You wouldn't have your kids doing that these days, but it was perfectly safe back in those times. And I started at the age of 11 or 12. I was earning good money, and by the age I was 15, I was selling advertising in my holidays, and in a week I would be able to earn close to £400 a week. And wow. So I learned how to do these things. And but it says in the Bible, Paul says, tribulation, that's trouble, works endurance, and endurance experience, and experience hope. And hope does not make ashamed, because the love of God is shed abroad in your hearts. And that's been my experience time and time and time again. And so important is it to Kathy and myself that we have told the children, you're not getting any of the business. You're not going to become shareholders. The business is going into a foundation when we die, and it will continue on because, and the reason we're doing that is it's not our business. It doesn't belong to us. Yes, we have to take responsibility with the tax department and all others to whom we owe money, but the business doesn't belong to us. The number of things that have happened that have been quite frankly miraculous along the journey shows that God has put his imprimatur on it. And he said to us in the kindest, nicest possible way, it's mine. And we've said to him, we want to give it back to you when the time comes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because your son, John, is actually your general manager, isn't he? He's in the business.
He's the group managing director and doing a very good job. And we've talked with all our children and they're perfectly happy. We've said to them, we will provide for you outside of the business. And that's only right because it says if a man doesn't provide for his own, he's worse than an unbeliever. And so we will provide for them. They will be adequately provided for, but they won't have ownership of the business. And there's a common saying, and many of you will have heard it, and there's a lot to be said for it. The first generation employs, the second generation enjoys, the third generation destroys. Now, it's not that we want a name for ourselves. I can rejoice that my name's written in heaven, and that's the greatest honor roll in the universe, and one that's never going to fade. And I'm going to be there, and I'm going to have an incorruptible and undefiled and unfading inheritance in the heavenlies. And that's where I'm going. That's where Kathy's going. And through God's grace, that's where our children are all going. And they're all completely comfortable with it. That's how it's going to be.
Yeah, wonderful, Frank. Well, really, on that note, I think we should open up to questions from the men. I mean, that's a wonderful note that you've climaxed on there.
Thanks, Frank. Love your acknowledgement that God's hands on your business. And my thought is that it's easy to say God's hands on business when it's you're experiencing great success. What I'm I'd love to hear is how what your decision-making process was to include God or discern the decisions that God wanted you to make, particularly in some of those challenges that you experienced.
Well, God has been part of my life probably since I was born. But I came to know him personally probably when I was only 7 years old. There have been times, there's been waxing and waning, I admit that. But the fact is, he's always been there and he's never changed. When there's been a change in the relationship, it's me who's moved away. But in those times of crisis, all you can do is cast yourself on God because you can't do any more. It was impossible for me to work more hours. And had I worked more hours, I couldn't have done any more than I was doing in the 16 hours to turn things around. So you get to the stage where you say, well, I've got to let go and let God. And I can remember, I can't remember who it was, but I had a CD with some Christian singer singing, a guy, and I had it on one morning, and I was in the depths of despair, and I played this, and the tears rolled down my face. And this is a full-grown man, rolled down the face, and I just kept saying, God, you give, and you give, and you give again. And so I know you're going to do it for me. It's not that we can hold God to ransom, but he loves to see us trusting in him and trusting in the darkest situations. It's easy to trust when everything's going well. And it's actually easy to get away from trust at those times because you think, I have done this, I can do it myself. As King Nebuchadnezzar said, and it got him into terrible trouble. He ended up eating grass as a result of it. Is this the great Babylon which I have builded?
It's very true. I've got a question here from Oliver.
Yes, Frank, thank you very much for this very, very interesting presentation. My question is really to do with, the people you deal with and what your philosophy is about dealing with people. You've really had some pretty ugly people in your life, people who've tried to squeeze you, people who've tried to sort of put you out of business, people who try to overcharge you and so on. And you've fronted up to them pretty solidly and sort of taken them on. But I'm sure that's not the general situation. I mean, that's perhaps more of an exception than generally. And I'm wondering, when you enter into relationships with people, do you look at their character or do you look at their bank balance?
I look at their character. And when we employ people too. And it's interesting. I have adopted the policy of telling people when I'm wrong, apologizing to them and asking for their forgiveness. And that's what I've been convicted I need to do at any time. And I always get back the people that were there. If what I said has been unfair, whether through lack of knowledge or anger or whatever it might be, I do that. Now, the beauty of that is that you can then demand the same from them. And it's I think, the best way in the world to eradicate politics from businesses. And so the people that want to play politics, they don't stay very long because there's nowhere for them to climb. And people love you for it. And you teach them how to say, I'm wrong and I'm sorry. I must tell you this one. It happened where a guy was told by the managing director to give a different presentation for marketing. I told him it was a board meeting, it was the budget session. I told him it was the worst marketing presentation I'd ever heard and he should be ashamed of himself. I later found out that the managing director of the day had said he was going to do something else. He said, no, you won't, you'll do this. And he was kept quiet when I did that. So I reconvened the board, which meant bringing two directors from Melbourne, and all the general managers had to come in, and I apologised to the guy. And at the end of it, I said, I asked for your forgiveness. Oh, don't worry about that. I said, no, it's important to me, Pat. Don't worry about that. I said, well, I do worry about it. It's important to me. I'm asking for your forgiveness. He said, well, of course. 2 days later, I rang him. In the old days of phones that they couldn't tell who was ringing, and he answered it. Hello. I said, it's Frank here, Pat. Yes. No. Yes. End of conversation. I got what I needed to know. Didn't know what was bugging him. A few days later, I rang him again. Same thing. Hello. Yes. No. I said, Pat, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but if you think you're going to make me feel guilty, you're wasting your time, because I asked you for your forgiveness and you gave it to me. So that's the end of the matter. So I suggest you stop acting like a silly little spoiled boy and act like a man. He said, oh, yeah, okay. That was his opportunity he thought, to get something on me. And politics, you can deal with it in that way.
Just on that, Frank, just briefly share with the men what you said about your dad when you came downstairs one morning.
Oh, well, we didn't have stairs. We were lower middle class.
Okay, sorry.
But I was brought in out of the sleep out. And yeah, I was the youngest, so I was brought in last. And when I got to the table, my father's Bible, with big Bibles open, his glasses were on. He'd look around at all of us, and then he'd read, and then we'd kneel down and pray, and then we have breakfast. This morning, the Bible was closed, and his glasses, I thought, that's strange. And then my father took his glasses off and folded them and put them on top of the Bible. I thought, that's strange. And then he looked around at us all and he said, I want to apologise to everybody in this family for being such a bad father. I thought to myself, you are not a bad father. You're the most wonderful father in the world. And he went on to say, because if I'd have been the father I should have been, the argument that occurred last night between the older children in this family would never have happened. Now, I can tell you, there wasn't a dry eye around that table. And that has been the model for me doing what I do. He never lost anything by apologising, taking full responsibility. And people think you lose, but you actually gain respect if you do it. You don't do it for that reason. You do it because it's right. And yeah, that's and I was probably only 4 or 5 at the time, but that's one of my most vivid recollections.
Thank you. A question from Jeff.
Frank, thank you so much. I found your talk absolutely inspiring. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I was just going to ask a bit about 2 things about hiring staff. Do you mostly promote from within, or do you ever hire senior people from outside? And if so, how do you go through that process? What are your hiring methods? And the second question was, if you were going to talk to or advise someone who wanted to start manufacturing in Australia, any particular guidance there, given our high labour costs?
Can I answer that one first while it's fresh in my mind? You might need to remind me of the first one. The advice I give to everybody who's starting is be absolutely open and honest and upfront with your suppliers. I remember I went to a tool maker. We had to get a lot of injection molding dies made to do what we did. And I went to an injection mold die maker who I knew was good. And I gave him all my drawings and he quoted me, and I didn't go to anybody else. I knew he was good, and he was a Polish fellow, and he gave me the quotes. And I said to him, well, I'm ready to accept all of these quotes. He said, oh, good. I said, now there's one thing. I said, I need 180 days credit. He said, 180 days credit, why? And I explained to him that I was selling to Lawrence and Hanson, and there would be slowness in their payments, and et cetera, et cetera. And anyway, he said, I need to think about it. Nobody has ever asked me for 180 days credit. Come back and see me in 2 days. So I went back 2 days later. He said, I told you nobody has ever asked for 180 days credit, but I now must tell you plenty of people have taken it. And because you were so honest, I'm going to give it to you. And that is the most important thing. You've got to live with yourself, and you've got to be able to look people in the eye. Sometimes you'll have a disagreement with people, and you may part ways. But if they're people that are performing well, then you look them in the eye, and when you're in trouble, they come to you and they say, how long is this going to take you to get out of? I think it will be about this long, and you give yourself a bit extra, and they say, okay, all right, that's fine. If you're going to be able to fix it in that time, that's it. And it's a wonderful legacy that you get just by simply being absolutely honest.
The other aspect of the question was about, do you hire from within or do you bring in external people?
We try and hire from within wherever we can, and we get a lot of opportunity to do that. There's a saying, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know, and the people have been working for you for a long time. You know their idiosyncrasies. You know what you can live with, and if they're still there, you can live with all of them. But also, it does so much for the whole organisation. Makes them feel, we keep telling them they're part of the Seeley family. This shows them that our money is where our mouth is. It's not just cheap talk. We really do it. Now, there are times when you have to hire from without, and certainly when you're looking for additional workers, you will go there. But no, wherever we can, we promote from within. Sometimes the person within's not ready for it, and if they thought they were going to get it, you talk to them and say, look, here are the reasons we didn't give it to you, but there's going to be another opportunity, etc. So yeah, it's a very well adjusted workforce that we have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Frank. Well, we've just got a couple of minutes left. There may be still a question that someone would like to ask. While I wait for that, Frank, you are in your early 80s, I gather?
Yeah, it's very early 80s. I'm only 81.
Yeah.
Barely.
You strike me as having a lot of energy. What are your hopes, your plans over the next, God willing, the next 5-10 years?
Oh, look, I hope to be around. John's running the business, but he has to answer me at board meetings because I'm still executive chair. But I'm running a division called Imagineering, and we're working on over the horizon technologies. We have one PhD who's full-time working. Can't tell you what he's doing. If I told you, I'd have to shoot you. And we've got very, very highly sophisticated people. And, these people are switched on. They're the sort of people that they'll send you an email at 1 o'clock in the morning. They're still working on something, even though they're home, their minds are still going. And I understand it because it's actually not only invigorating, but it's empowering when you have this sort of innovative streak. And the other thing that we do a lot in Imagineering is we interact. And there's no such thing as a bad idea. Anybody can say anything they want to. They're not going to say stupid things, but you can challenge any idea, and out of that comes the best possible ideas that you can get. And of course, turn to your Bible and you see that it says in Proverbs, in the multitude of counselors, there's much wisdom. And we prove that every day in Imagineering, and it's fun. And so as long as I can keep doing it, I'm going to be there. And I don't see the end in sight. I know there is an end, but I'm not looking on that.
Wow. Well, it is an inspiration. Doesn't matter what age, but it's an inspiration that at 81 you're heading up the Imagineering section with PhDs. No doubt they're coming up with lots of rubber foam pieces to block holes. Well, gentlemen, I think our time is up. I had indicated that Al Stewart would close with a prayer, but Al texted me that his internet crashed, so he can't do that. So I'm back. Oh, you're back.
I'm back.
There you are. Wonderful. Well, just before Al does that, gentlemen, thank you for joining. Let me tell you what's in store. So next week, we have our small groups. These are available in person or online. A feedback form will come out, so please do indicate your interest. We really encourage you to join small groups. This is where the heart of the fellowship exists that Oliver spoke of at the outset, and also a chance for us to reflect on the many insights that Frank has shared with us this morning. There'll be more meetings the rest of September. the next time that we all get together in this format for our national Zoom will be the 14th of October, when Professor Nigel Bigger from Oxford will be presenting. So you can mark that date in the diaries, the 14th of October, for the next national Zoom. Well, gentlemen, similar to what Oliver said at the outset about him returning from overseas, I'm actually leaving tonight for a bit of a trip. So I hope to be able to stay in touch with you in one form or another, but it's always wonderful to see you on the screen. And I'm going to pass to Al Stewart to say a short prayer.
Thanks, Peter. I'll say a prayer then. Dear God, thank you for how you've blessed Frank and Kathy over so many years. Thank you for your hand on that business, and that there's been so much good happen through that. People employed and wealth created and shared. Thank you for the trust that you've given Frank in you, and the confidence and joy with which he can look to the future. Lord God, we ask, please, you might all come to know that confidence and joy through trusting the Lord Jesus. And ask, please, we might be able to take to heart the power of apology and forgiveness, and give us the humility to learn that lesson. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Al. And Frank, once again, where have you got on my screen? You're there somewhere. Can't see you.
I can see you.
Oh, I can see you. There you are. Thank you again so much for sharing with us. It's been wonderful.
Good. Thank you. It's been a privilege.